Welcome to Q&A Mondays here at MH News. I'm your host, Matt Haslam. Now, if you'd like your question read on the show, please email them to questions@mhnews.info, or you can comment below on YouTube or Facebook. You can also check out our episodes every weekday from now on mhnews.info. First question today: what all editing softwares do you use? Well, I actually use 4, typically 5 sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. The first of which is an audio program called Acoustica Mixcraft 6.0. It's a fantastic audio program. Mostly we use it for music editing and stuff like that, and editing, live audio or editing recorded audio for different music videos or something like that. Typically music, though, I have to say. It's not the most fantastic for video audio. It just isn't. It's typically just for different music aspects. So I use that for all my audio editing for different client work. Then I'll use Magic's Video Pro X4, which is a video program. I typically use that for bulk of the basic work in video editing, such as like end credits or, just main workflow of like getting audio synced up with the video for an interview. And then I'll export that to another program later on, more professional program. That's actually, I export from Magic Video Pro, the basic stuff I do in there, just to get the main workflow down, because Magic's has a lot less RAM on it, so like it takes a lot less data from your computer. Like your computer can only do so much at a certain time, so Magic's Video Pro is a lot better for editing initially, and then you take it over to another program such as Adobe Premiere later on. But typically I'll edit the basic stuff in Magic's Video Pro X4, then I'll export that to Adobe Premiere, and Adobe Premiere and After Effects are brand new to us here, but I love them so much already. Typically I'll use Adobe Premiere for most of my video audio editing, and then I'll use it mostly for editing and all of my special effects for After Effects and stuff like that. I'll use it for a lot of my workload and a crap load of editing through Adobe Premiere and After Effects. That's where most of the productions get done, is in those two programs, and then I'll export to YouTube or wherever I'm going. Then I also have GoPro Studio, which isn't used all the time. A lot of the GoPro shots we have are actually edited in Magic's or Adobe Premiere, because they both have fisheye capabilities to counteract the fisheye of the GoPro lens. But typically I'll use GoPro if it's a really bad edit, a bad take of a certain scene and the fisheye is really bad, or if I need a time lapse or something like that. Typically, I don't think Magic's or Adobe Premiere, I don't know about Adobe Premiere yet, but I haven't learned everything on there yet, so I don't know if they have it. But my time lapses all do in GoPro Studio, which is a free version that you can get from GoPro directly, and I'll take all the time lapses and make them MP4, export those to Magic's, and then export that if I need to for more special effects and stuff like that into Adobe Premiere. So it's actually 5 programs in all that I use on a consistent basis. Next question: how is the workflow / set of a TV show different than that of a movie? Is one easier than the other? I would say they're not too much different. I think your workflow for a typical TV show happens every week. So typically your TV shows go to a green screen most times, because it's just easier to do that than to find a location and do all the work to get that location. But typically movies go out to the location, find the locations, and build that set. So if you're talking about the differences between the two, your movies are going to find locations and build that set physically. Your TV shows are going to have a lot of green screen shots, and they're going to build that set virtually later on in post-production. So it's a matter of how you work it. but a lot of like the outer space or otherworldly scenes that they're in another dimension or something like that, that's all on green screen, no matter if you're in a film or if you're on a TV show. But TV shows, you have to remember, they have to come out every week. So I think the movies are a little bit easier just because you have a lot more time to do them. And typically they won't release the release date of the film until, or any information about the film, until they know the film is done, it's all edited, everything's perfect on it. So if you take an extra day or two to edit it, nobody really cares because nobody knows about it yet until you're done and your producer's happy. So I think films are a lot more easier to do in the long run, but it depends on what environment you're happy working in. If that's what your question is all about, you have to look at what kind of environment you'd be happy working in and go for that. Next question. Some basic equipment for a short film. I know lights, camera, and sound, but other important things, please. Love your questions. They're not really questions, but they're questions. So on this, I would say if you have, I know I'm working on the short film right now, and for that, a lot of the shots I'm getting are on jib, and that's just how it is. Jibs are fantastic when they're used, but they take a lot of time to set up on everything you do. Jibs, typically we have to set it down, move it with a vehicle or something like that, or a cart, then set it up all again. It's just too big to just carry or use dollies on because, you're on locations that aren't necessarily level sometimes. So we'll have to set it down and then reset it up again. So it takes a lot of time. So if you don't have time, I wouldn't use a jib, but typically I'll use like sliders, tripods, and stuff like that. The typical stuff you're going to have for a production company anyway, I would use, but I would actually take one thing out of your list here. I wouldn't have much to add to it other than props, because what's mostly important for a short film isn't the cameras, they're not the lights, they're not the sound, it's the props and the stuff in front of the camera and how good your actors are, because you can have a fantastic actor and have really, really crappy video quality. Nobody cares because your actor is a fantastic actor. So I would concentrate on getting good actors. If you have a budget, I would spend it on good actors. But I would take one thing out of your list here. I wouldn't use lights for most of the things I have to do. Typically, if you have to do a dark lit scene of an alleyway, sure, you're going to need some lights. But I would just mostly use sunlight and bounce cards. So I would just buy like $2-3 poster board at your local craft store and use that, because that's going to be a lot better in the end for lights. Because remember, lights take a ton of time to set up, more than a jib. It takes a crap load of time to set up lights and soft boxes and all that kind of stuff. It just takes a lot of time, and it also takes electricity. So if you're doing like run and gun shots or stuff on the road, then don't use lights, just use bounce cards. Next question, how to handle production sound on your run and gun shoots. Typically I have a microphone on my camera, and not the built-in microphone, by the way. It's an external one. It's a cardioid Samson CO2 mic that I plug into a Zoom H4n, and I typically mount that somewhere on my camera rig, on my shoulder rig or something like that. Something to have a microphone on that. That's pretty darn good mic. But I don't have a Rode Video Mic Pro, unfortunately. Just not something I ever got over the years. I want to, but not something I have so far. But that's what you typically want to have for run and gun stuff. But having a Samson CO2 with a Zoom H4n is good enough for a lot of what run and gun sound you need. With run and gun, you're not going to be able to set up the shot too well. So you're going to have a lot of post-production editing in audio. And a lot of times I'll take that to my Acoustica Mixcraft audio software just to mix it and edit it, add a little bit of EQ on it before I bring it over to edit the actual sound with the video. But that's just the way it has to go to make it sound good. Last question. Is it possible to be the director of photography / cinematographer and the director at the same time, or is it too much work? I seem to notice most big directors are only the director, so I was wondering if it is too much to be both. Well, typically on big productions, you're right. Because first off, they have the budget. Second off, it's a lot of work. And you have to kind of remember the workflow of a film. Typically, your producer is the CEO. You can basically imagine a company and imagine a film crew and compare the two really easily, because the CEO is your producer, and underneath that is the COO, which is the chief operating officer, which is your director. And your producer only talks to your COO, and that's the only person that they're in charge of everybody, but they only ever talk to the director, and that's really all their main concern is the director. Then the director is in charge of all the operations, so they're in charge of all these different supervisors and heads of departments, which include your director of photography, director of audio, director of lighting, all these different directors. And your director of photography will be just in charge of cameramen. Your director of audio will be in charge of all your audio crew, and so on and so forth. So typically on bigger films, they have the people and they have the capability to do that. But remember, they're also doing a feature film, so they have a lot bigger project to work on. For a lot of smaller things, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have the budget for that. So a lot of times what they'll end up doing is the director is also your director of photography. But remember with that, you're not doing as much workflow. So while there's a lot to do as a director, if you're the one and only director and you don't have a director of photography, a DOP, which is what we typically say it is, if you don't have a DOP, then you're in charge of everything. So it becomes this thing where you're doing a lot more, but remember, you're not doing as big of a production. So if you're doing a short film, or if you're doing a little video, like a music video, typically doesn't have a director of photography, unless you're dealing with, like A-list artists, music videos. But typically the workflow isn't enough to justify a director of photography and a director, so just keep that in mind. I know on a project I'm working on, I'm the director of photography on it, but I have a director over me to tell me what they need, and the director is typically in charge of making sure we stay to the script, and they're in charge of making sure the scene looks fantastic, but the DOP is in charge of making sure the video aspect is good. And really, when I'm at DOP, I don't care about audio, I don't care about lighting. Maybe I'll talk to the lighting guy, I'll talk to the audio guy if I'm noticing something, but it's their job to make sure the lighting's right. And director of photography and lighting guy, lighting engineers work out really closely, because let's face it, lighting makes a difference for the director of photography. So we'll work really closely, but I can care less about audio if I'm a DOP, because it's their job to figure that out. And I'm in charge of my department. So if I'm director of audio that day, I would only worry about audio. I wouldn't care about visuals, the props. I wouldn't care about anything. I would just care about audio. That's just how it goes. But if you have the budget, definitely bring in a DOP and a director. But typically on a lot of micro budget things, a lot of frugal things, smaller things, you don't have that. Sorry, Charlie. It's just not all there. And just like with an AC, you don't have a first AC, you don't have all these crew members around if you don't have the budget for it, or if the production doesn't require it, if it isn't big enough. So just keep that in mind. Again, if you'd like to send your questions in, please send them to questions@mhnews.info, and join us back here every Monday through Friday for brand new episodes. Tomorrow we're talking about a documentary I'm working on, and then Thursday we're talking about still photography and all that goodness, and Wednesday is our product review Wednesdays, so join us back here for that every weekday from now on. Join us back here at MHNews.info, or subscribe below to check out more great episodes. Have a good one, people, and see us next time. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to our channel for new episodes airing every Monday through Thursday. Have a good one.